Good day, sir. Today I am going to perform the final term output, which is the computation of grades in secondary learning areas. For the task 1A, the following grades are obtained in a class of a grade 9 students. So the question is, using a norm reference grading with a 7-point scale, determine the scores that would get a failing mark. And what is your general comment on this? So the score that will get a failing mark is 74 below because the mean is 83.43. All students pass using the norm reference grading with a 7-point scale. Number 2. Using a norm reference grading with an 8-point grading scale, determine the scores that would get a failing mark and what is your general comment on this? The same step with the question number 1. The mean is 83.35, so the failing score would be 77 and below. So there are students that would fail using the norm reference grading with an 8-point scale. Task 1B, we need to compute the grades of a grade 5 English with the following roll scores. Written, we need to get the percentage score. The formula for the percentage score is PS over the learner's total roll scores over the highest possible score times 100. So, PS over the learner's total roll score over the highest possible score times 100%. So for the written work, the student got 75 out of 100. 75 over 100 times 75 is the learner's total roll score, and the highest score is 100 times 100%. So this is equals 75. So for the performance task, the student got 80 out of 100. So the same process in getting the percentage score. The formula is the PS over the total roll score over highest possible score times 100%. For the percentage score of the performance task, 80 over 100 times 100% equals 80. And for the score in the quarterly assessment, the student got 65 out of 100. So, I need to put 65 over 100 times 100% equals 65. So in every subject and every grade level, there are different weight of component for each of them. So I will put it here, the weight of component. And for this question, for the English subject, the weight of component for the written work is 30%, for the performance task is 50%, and for the quarterly test or assessment is 20%. So the formula of getting the weighted score is percentage score times the weight of component. So the percentage score for the written work is 30%. So weighted score equals the percentage score times the weight of component. The percentage score for the written work is 75. So 75 multiplied by 30%, which is the weight of component of the grade 5 English subject. So it equals to 22.50. This is the weighted score for the written work. So next, we need to get the weighted score of the performance task. So the percentage score times weight of component. The percentage score of the performance task is 80 multiplied by 50%, which is the weight of component of the English subject. So 80 times 50% equals 40. Next is getting the weighted score of the quarterly assessment. The weighted score is 65 times 20% is the weight of component of the English subject for the quarterly assessment. So 65 multiplied by 20% is 13. Next step is getting the initial grade. So we need to add the weighted score to get the initial grade. So the weighted score here are 22.50 for the written work plus 40 for the performance task and 13 for the quarterly assessment. So we need to add the weighted scores, which is 22.50 plus 40 plus 13 is equals to 75.50, which is the initial grade of a grade 5 English student. So to get the final grade, we need to see, and we need it to transmute. So we need to see the transmutational table, which is in the website of the Department of Education. So I will paste here the transmutational table to see what is the final grade of this student. So the transmuted grade for the 75.50 is equals to 84. So the final grade of the grade 5 student is 84 for the English subject. So we need to put here 84%. So next is getting the grade of the grade 6 student in mathematics with the following row scores. So the same process that we have done in the first number. PS equals the learner's total row score over the highest possible score times 100%. So 33 is the learner's row score over 50 times 100% is equals to 66. So we need to get the performance task percentage score. So it is equals to 40 over 60 times 100%. So the percentage score for the performance task is 66.67. So next is getting the percentage score of the quarterly assessment. So 30, which is the student's total roll score, over 40, which is the highest possible score, times 100%, equals to 70. 75. So the next step is getting the weighted scores. So in the area of mathematics, the weight of components for the written work is 40%, for the performance task is 40%, and the quarterly assessment is 20%. So the same process here. We need to multiply the percentage score for the written work, which is 66 times the weight of component, 40%, is equals to 26.40. Next is the weighted score of the performance task. So the performance task is 66.67 times 40% is equals to 26.67. Next is getting the weighted score of the quarterly assessment, which is 75 multiplied to 20%, which is the weight of component for the quarterly assessment of the mathematics subject, is equals to 15. So we need to get the initial grade, so we add the weighted score for the written work, which is 26.40, plus for the performance task, 26.67, plus 15 for the quarterly assessment. So the final grade is 68.7. The grade 6 students in mathematics final grade is 80. 68.07 is transmuted through the transmutational table, which is the final grade is 80. So his final grade is 80%. Next is the task 2A. So in this table, you will see the percentage scores of Julia Anderson and Araling Pandipunan for the first grading period. So we need to study the table first. In order to get the total roll scores of Julia Anderson and the written work, we need to add her scores. So the total roll scores equals 10, 10, 19, plus 20, plus 22, plus 25, plus 30 is equals to 144. So Julia's total roll score is 144. 144. So next is getting the percentage score. PS for the percentage score equals the learner's total row score over his highest possible score times 100%. So, her total row score is 144, and the highest possible score is 190 times 100% is equals to 75.79. So Julia's percentage score for the written work is 75.79. Next is getting the weighted score. So the formula for the weighted score is the percentage score multiplied by its weight of component. Weight of component. So the percentage score for Julia's written work is 75.79 times 30%, which is the weight of component of the Arling Panlipunan, is equals to 22.74. This is the weighted score of Julia's written work. 22.74. Next blank is getting the total row score of the performance task. Plus 24 plus 24 plus 28 equals to 92. So is 92. So next is getting the percentage score. And getting the percentage score, PS equals over 110 is the highest possible score times 100% is equals to 83.64. So next is getting the percentage score of the quarterly assessment. So before we proceed in getting the percentage score of the quarterly assessment, there is some concern because the weighted score for the performance task should be 41.82. It is not 30. So when we multiply the percentage score times 50, which is the weight of component for the Arling Panlipunan in the performance task, it should be 41.82 and not 30. So next, we proceed to percentage score. In getting the quarterly assessment percentage score, the formula is percentage score equals 30 over 50 times 100% is equals to 60. So the percentage score of the quarterly assessment is 60. Next is we need to get the weighted score for the quarterly assessment. So the weighted score equals the percentage score, which is 60, times the weight of component, which is 20%, is equals to 18. So the weighted score of the quarterly assessment is 18. So we're done filling up the blanks. Questions. Suppose Ellen's grade in the same subject for the second, third, and fourth quarter is 87, 88, and 90 respectively. Compute her final rating and gave its descriptive equivalent. So the given here is 87, 88, and 90, which is the same subject of Julia Anderson's Araling Panlipunan for the first grading period. So there is lacking here because there is no given grade for the first quarter. So in order to get the first grading grade, I add the weighted scores for Julia Anderson's written work, performance task, and quarterly assessment. So when I add it, it is the initial grade of 76.57, which is transmuted into 85. So in order to get Ellen's final rating, we need to add the first, second, third, and fourth quarter grades. For the first quarter, 85 plus second quarter, which is 88, divided by 4. So Ellen's final grade is 88. Passed. Ellen passed the school year. For the task 2B, determine the final grade or the final average. So, Ellen's rating in the Araling Panlipunan is 88. This means she passed the subject. In order to get the general average, we need to add her final grades. 89, 89, plus 82, plus 87, plus 88, is 91, plus 85, plus 74, over 8. So, Ellen's general average is 86. 86. Meaning, Ellen passed. For the last task, which is the task 3, so you are provided a table showing a sample card of a grade 6 student named Paulo for the first quarter of the school year 2020 and 2021. So we need to fill up the needed answers. So based on the table given, we need to get the weighted scores of the written work, the weighted scores for the performance task, and the weighted score for the quarterly assessment, Paulo's initial grade, and his quarterly grade. So weighted score equals percentage score times the weight of component So Paulo's weighted score for the written work in the Filipino subject is 85. Multiplied by the weight of component for the written work, which is 30%. Equals 25.5. So his weighted score is 25.5. So next is the weighted score for the performance task, which is the weight of component for the Filipino subject, the performance task. Is equals to 40.5. 40.5. So next is getting the weight of component of the quarterly assessment. In the quarterly assessment, so the weight here is 15. So in order to get his initial grade in Filipino, you need to add 25.5 plus 40.5 plus 15 is equals to 51. So, his initial grade is 81. So if you look at the transmutational table, 81 is equivalent to 88. Next, we need to get the weighted score of the written works in his English subject. 82 multiplied by 30% is equals to 24.6. It is 24.6. Next is we need to get the weighted score for the performance task in his English subject. Weighted score equals 77 38.5 is his weighted score in the performance task. Next is getting the quarterly assessment weighted score. Weighted score is equals to 75 times 20% is equals to 15. I need to get 15 here. So, in order to get the initial grade, we need to add their weighted scores. 24.6 plus 38.5 plus 15 is equals to 78.1. So his initial grade for the English subject is 78.1, which is transmuted to 86. Next is getting the weighted score in the performance task of a science subject. Weighted score equals to 79 times 40% is equals to 31. So the weighted score for the performance task is 31.6. Next is the weighted score for the quarterly assessment. It's equal to 13. So 13 is the weighted score for the quarterly assessment in the science subject. So to get the initial grade, we need to add 30.4 plus 35. So the initial grade is 75. The transmuted grade for 75 is 84. So the quarterly grade of Paulo in the science subject is 84. Next is getting the weighted score for the subject Araling Panglipunan. For the written works, 8.9. So the weighted score is 24.9. Next is the weighted score for the performance task. Equals 41.5. 41.5 is the weighted score for the performance task in Araling Panlipunan. Next is the weighted score for quarterly assessment. 16.6 is the weighted score for quarterly assessment in Araling Panlipunan. In order to get the initial grade, we need to add the weighted scores. 16.6 is equal to 83. 83 is Paulo's initial grade in Araling Panlipunan, and a transmuted grade is 89. So his quarterly grade in Araling Panlipunan is 89. So next is getting the grades and edukasyon sa pagpapakatao. 25.2 is the weighted score for the written works in ESP. Next is the performance task weighted scores. 84 times 50%, which is the weight of component again, is equal to 42. 42 is the weight of component for performance task in ESP. For the quarterly assessment, 84 times 20% is equal to 16.8. 16.8. When we add 25.2 plus 42 plus 16.8 is equal to 84. So 84 is the initial grade of Paulo in edukasyon sa pagpapakatao. So when we transmute 84, it will become 90. So 90 is the quarterly grade of Paulo in edukasyon sa pagpapakatao. Next is getting the grades in edukasyon pangtahanan at pangkabuhayan. To get the weighted score for the written works, which is 20% is the weight of component in the written works of EPP. So 80% equals 16. So 16. Next is getting the weight of component. 84 times 60% is equal to 50.4. 50.4 is the weighted score in the performance task in edukasyon sa pagpapakatao. Next is getting the weighted score in quarterly assessment. 77. 15.4. 15.4 is the weighted score. So we add 16 plus 50.4 plus 15.4 is equal to 81.8. 81.8 is the initial grade of Paulo and EPP. So the transmuted grade of 81.8 is 88. Is his quarterly grade in edukasyong pangtahanan at pangkabuhayan. Next is computing the grades in MAPE. First is we need to compute the music, arts, physical education, and health. Music. 76, which is the percentage score in written works, multiplied by 20%, which is the weight of component for the written works in music, is equal to 15.2. 15.2. 15.2 is the weighted score. Next is 77 times 60% is equal to 46.2. 46.2. Next is the quarterly assessment. 25 times 20% is equal to 15. 15. So, 15.2, 46.2, and 15, when you add it up, it is equal to 76.4. So 76.4 is the initial grade of Paulo and music. And the transmitted grade of 76.4 is 85. Next is in arts. 85 multiplied by 20% is equal to 17. 17. 81 multiplied by 60%, which is the weight of component and performance task for MAPE. It is equal to 48.6. So 80 times 20%, the weight of component in quarterly assessment, is equal to 16. 16. So to get the initial grade, we add 17 plus 40, 8.6 plus 16 is equal to 81.6. Which is the transmitted grade is 88. Next is the grade for physical education. 80 times 20%, the weight of component in written works, is equal to 16. Next is 80 times 60% is equal to 48. Next is the weight scores in quarterly assessment. 78 times 20% is 15.6. 15.6. So the total weighted scores is 79.6, which is the initial grade of Paulo in physical education. So 87 is the transmuted grade, which is his quarterly grade. Next is in health. 85 times 20% is equal to 17. 17. Next is 81 multiplied by 60% is equal to 48.6. 75 for the quarterly assessment 75 times 20% is equal to 15. We add 17 plus 48.6 plus 15 in order to get the initial grade. So the initial grade is 80.6. When we transmute 80.6, we can have 87, which is his now quarterly grade for health. So we add the percentage scores and divide it by 4, which is transmuted into 87. Question: what is Paulo's composite grade in MAPE? How did you find it? So Paulo's composite grade in MAPE is 87. I find it through adding the percentage score of written works and divide it by 4. The same process for looking the answers for the percentage scores of the performance task and quarterly assessment. Then compute the weighted scores for each component, which is 20% for the written works, 60% for the performance task, and 20% for the quarterly assessment. Add the weighted scores to get the initial grade and transmute it to get the final grade. Next is, in which learning area did Paulo perform best during the first quarter? Explain briefly your basis. Paulo performs best in the subject of edukasyon sa pagpapakatao. He got a high percentage score in the performance task, which is 50% in the weight of component. He also got a high percentage for the written works and quarterly assessment, which is 84% in every percentage. So, next question, in which learning area does Paulo need to improve on? Why so? Paulo needs to improve in the area of mathematics. His overall percentage in the written works, performance task, and quarterly assessment are very low. He needs to develop his critical thinking in order to have a positive concept and confidence on his ability to learn and understand mathematics. Next question. What does his level of proficiency in Araling Panlipunan signify? Paulo's level of proficiency in the subject Araling Panlipunan is proficient, which is equivalent to 85 to 89%, because his final grade for the subject is 89%. He consistently demonstrates an understanding of the standards, concepts, and skills taught during this reporting period. The last question. Describe Paulo's overall performance in the first quarter. How would you communicate this to his parents? As I get to compute the overall performance of Paulo based on his general average, which is 86.38 or 86%, it is not an excellent performance, but it is above average. I will give his parents his report card and tell his parents that he needs to enhance his performance, especially in mathematics. I will advise them that Paulo needs to practice in math subjects. So a teacher needs to be always responsible and careful and accurate and honest in recording and computing the grades, as well as to be transparent with it to the students and their parents when necessary, because it is important to assess your student and to know where your student needs to improve and develop, and it will make you an effective teacher in your classroom.